All right. Good morning, folks, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We are going to kick off the December Q&A. And give me some credit. I'm on time this month. It is actually in December, and we're doing the December Q&A. So let's kick off with the first round of questions. These are from Instagram and also YouTube. Hope you're all doing well. Grab yourself a drink, get settled in. Let's go. So the first question is from Richard Murray. Now, Richard's an OG to the channel, so thank you for the question. It's been there since the beginning. Richard asked a question about the wizard routine. So the wizard routine is my ebook, which explains how to build your own full body, heavy, light, medium system for hypertrophy. So it's my most popular book. And so he's got a question. He says, I'm still on stage 1 of the wizard and loving it. I just wanted to ask about the length of the heavy workout. At the moment, I'm supersetting 8 exercises, great. And although I feel I'm going at a decent pace, my workouts are clocking in at around 80 to 90 minutes. Yeah. So light workout is 35 minutes, quite a difference. Medium is 50 minutes. Should I try to bring my time down on the heavy day? My main concern is when I add exercises in, the workout will take forever. So many thanks, love the channel and the wizard. Cool. Right. So this is a really good question. And I think it's maybe something which requires kind of a bit of a mentality shift. So I think quite a lot of guys come from a sort of a power building background where it's a fairly minimalistic training style. You know, you've got your movement patterns, you hit your bench, you hit your overhead press, you do a squat, you do a pull, you do a row, and you do them nice, hard, heavy, basic, resting 3 to 5 minutes between sets, fairly low volume count over the course of the week, just something nice and basic, which works really well. Don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with that approach per se, but my routines are a little more, particularly this one. This is specifically a hypertrophy routine. It's focused a little bit more on hypertrophy and a lot less on strength gain. I have got strength books. I have the Tactician, which is all about strength, but this book is specifically a hypertrophy training book, and it's designed to pack in as much useful volume as possible. So I think there needs to be a mentality change going from stage 1 to stage 2 and then to stage 3. And that part of that mentality change will involve shortening your rest periods, because the mentality I think when you're power building is you have to approach every single set completely fresh, ready to go. Now, there's good and bad to that. I think the good side is you're able to focus, which is cool. Okay. And you can put your all into every set. The bad side is you never really challenge yourself to adapt to shorter rest periods, to get better conditioning, to force yourself to focus on more work rather than just take the workout at a nice, comfortable pace, which again, nothing wrong with that. But when I'm looking at hypertrophy routines, particularly as I'm escalating the volume, if that's necessary, and I only, just to clarify, I only escalate the volumes when people stall. Volume is only there to drive more gains. It's not there just because you feel like doing it. Start low, build up as necessary. So with Richard, I know he's been doing the wizard routine for a while, I think at least 3 to 6 months. So he's in a good spot now where he can progress to part 2 when he's ready. So yeah, Richard, I would really recommend moving your mentality to that of acknowledging that it's okay to train on fatigue. If you have 2 minutes of rest between sets of squats, that's all right. Like, yes, temporarily, there will be an adaptation period where you're going to have to reduce the weight down so you can get all your reps across all 3 sets. But in the long term, you'll adapt. And what does that adaptation bring? It brings more hypertrophy. Like we all know, progressive overload is not just adding weight to the bar. Progressive overload is increasing the density of your workouts. It is adding reps. It's a whole bunch of other things, improving form, improving range of motion. That's all examples of progressive overload. And when I first did the wizard routine way back in the day, 2007, I ran it for like 3 or 4 years from 2007 2010. I was reducing my rest periods systematically over the course of those years, and it worked great. It was really good. It worked fantastically well for hypertrophy, and also it worked really well for strength too. But I won't get into that now because we're just talking about this routine. So yeah, I think, Richard, this is going to be a fun challenge for you. All right. If you're used to moving through the workout at a relatively leisurely pace, the light day and the medium day will be unusual because you'll be resting for less. Medium day less, light day a little bit less. And so with applying that to the heavy workout, it will challenge you cardiovascularly. It will challenge your muscles. It will challenge you in a different way than just getting your reps, adding weight to the bar, getting your plus ones. It's more than that. And the nice thing about hypertrophy is it's a very forgiving endeavor. Let's say you're a bit older. I'm not saying you are, Richard, but let's say some of you guys are a bit older, or maybe you're more beat up, or you know what, maybe you're just not cut out for the mentality of really heavy weights. Well, there are other ways to progress. Let me ask you guys a question. If you doubt this, let's say you rested only, I'm going to take a really extreme example. Let's say you rested only 60 seconds between sets, and the most you can do on the bench press right now with 60-second rest for 3 sets of 8 is a plate aside. That's all you can do, okay? Because it's hard, you have to rest. Now, what if you went from a plate aside for 3 sets of 8 with a minute rest to 2 plates aside for 3 sets of 8 with a minute rest? Do you think you're going to grow? What do you think? Do you think you're going to grow? Or do you think because it's not traditional rest periods, because it's not 3 minutes, because it's going on fatigue, do you think that's going to prevent you from growing? Now, I can answer that question confidently because I've done that many times in the past. I got some of my best gains training that way. So yes, I know it's not supported by science, but I'm just telling you what worked for me. That's a great strategy for me. One of the issues that I had, not to make this all about me, but one of the issues that I had when I was younger was I got extremely fast very quick. My body had a high capacity to produce force. I realized that in my first year of training. First year of training, I deadlifted almost 5 plates aside by the end of that year. So I had a very strong capacity to gain strength and be strong. I was a reasonably good sprinter and footballer when I was younger too. Now, the part of the problem that I had was I had to almost pull my strength back because my joints, my ligaments just weren't strong enough to keep up with the amount of force I could generate, and I would just hurt myself. So unusual problem, but it is what it is. So yeah, I think it requires a mentality shift, Richard, but I wanted to answer that because it's a really good question. Now, next question. This one is also about the wizard, and it's from a guy called Baron Broccoli. Mr. Broccoli, I think you're new to the channel, so welcome. Thank you for the question. And he says he's got a question about cardio and the wizard. Okay, good. Again, good question. So he says, my idea is to do 3 days of lifting with the wizard. So that's full body. And also 1 day of low to moderate intensity cardio and 1 day of moderate to high intensity cardio per week, as well as up to 10,000 steps. What do you think? I think that's a great way to go. For my money, I can see me as I transition through my 40s into my 50s and 60s. I can almost certainly see this is the way I'll train. Yeah, because I think if you're trying to combine a lot of cardio on your off days, which is great, by the way, cardio, fantastic for your health, awesome. You can't have a training session where you impose an abnormal amount of stress on any one body part. So full body training matched with cardio works extremely well, particularly if you're trying to do high intensity cardio. So it's a great combination. I would even go so far as to say that if you did 3 cardio sessions and 3 lifting sessions with 1 full day off per week, still staying active, going for a walk and stuff, that would be almost the perfect prescription for general health and just staying active. I think it would be great. So I think the only thing I would suggest for that is try and keep the high intensity session away from the heavy session. Perhaps put it after the light session. The light session is active recovery, basically. So you could go heavy, take a day off, light, high intensity cardio, medium, low intensity cardio, and start the cycle again. Something like that would work. But yeah, something like that. So I think that would work great. Okay, next question is from Black John. Black John, I also think, is new to the channel. I don't think we've interacted before, so welcome. He says, training approach for the 40 plus, married, with children, intermediate, time, stress, fatigue, energy management. Actually, I think the approach that I outlined just now to Baron Broccoli would probably be the best thing for you. I like 3 days a week of training, 2 or 3. For somebody in your position, 2 or 3 is fine. And I would go full body. And I would recommend the Wizard. That's why I wrote it. When I was doing the Wizard, I actually expanded the routine out to doing training more days per week. But what I outlined earlier was fantastic. It would work really well for you. 3 days a week in the gym and 3 days of cardio. And do the cardio whatever you can manage, right? So I'm going to assume by your question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to assume by your question, you are, tired, you're stressed, and perhaps as a result, your physique reflects that. You're not looking your best, let's just say politely, right? So maybe you've put on a few pounds since you were younger, you're not sleeping as well, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think full body workout is great because it burns a lot of calories, but it also is very good for glucose control, which tends to be worse as we get older. So that's important. And then in the off days, do some reasonable cardio. I've got a video on running for lifters. You should check it out. It's really good. I used it last year to go from being horrible at running to running for an hour within 3 months. It's a really good routine. So I think that's what you should do. Run the Wizard 3 days a week and do my running for lifters cardio routine. Just Google search it, running for lifters, Fazlifts. Do that 3 days a week and it'll be the best thing you do, I think, for your health, energy levels. The other thing I would say is with regards to stress, two big things. Firstly, I mean, there's lots of things in this area, but here's some big rocks, right? Firstly, food. Get on top of your food. You should be, at this point in your life, you should be prioritizing a health-based food model, not a performance-based one. And what I mean by that is protein intake, great. Don't get me wrong, fantastic. Okay. And that's always really emphasized. Eat your protein, eat big, get big. The only thing is, a lot of you guys who are eating big, you're not really doing a great deal of activity. So you end up just getting quite overweight. So fruits, vegetables are your friend. Okay. Start to get comfortable with the idea of the majority of your plate being fruits and vegetables, and then top that up with your proteins, wherever you want to get those from. So diet, it probably needs an overhaul, particularly if you've got young kids. Diet is the first thing that goes out the window with young kids. And then the next thing is you need something for your own peace of mind. I would recommend meditation. And I'm going to do a video about this in the future at some point. I think I would like the community to start meditation with me. I think this is something I talk about with my clients, and it is really useful. Life gets extremely busy. One of the key differences between where we are now to where we were when we were kids was this device here. That device means you are always on. You're always thinking, and it seeps into other areas of your life. Your brain never shuts down. We are in this constant cycle of just thinking all the time. It makes it very difficult to sleep. It makes it very difficult to relax. Meditation is the antithesis of modern society. I think for your mental health, it's crucial that you meditate. And this is a video I'll be creating soon about that, because I want all of you guys to try it with me for a month. So meditate, stay on top of your food. And the last thing is you need a good sleep hygiene model. I found the biggest thing as I've gotten older is I need to be more strict with myself on sleep. Like when I was in my 20s, I could sleep. No, I could sleep through anything, In my 30s, it got worse, and there was an adjustment period where I had to thought, I have to really take sleep seriously. Otherwise, I just won't get to sleep. Or I'll get to sleep and I'll wake up in the morning. So sleep hygiene is crucial. And I would recommend something like a shower before bed, put your phone away completely, and then read for 30 to 60 minutes. During that time, you might want to pop your supplements like magnesium, melatonin, whatever, and really, really take that seriously and have that as an established routine where you have a consistent bedtime. That will do a lot to help you sleep too. That's what I would recommend. Okay. Now, one last question about the wizard from Baron Broccoli. Again, got myself the wizard and I'm super excited to kick it off. My question, what is your take on the slight decline bench press? Now he says, my points are, it is super stable because the feet are locked in and it's shoulder friendly. The ROM is still decent, especially if you have long arms, as I do. Makes it perfect. Yeah, no, great. I'm a big fan of the decline bench, actually. So I know that a few years ago, some of the usual sort of evidence-based bros and full ROM experts did sort of downplay the decline bench. I personally think it's a great option. We always had a decline bench at the gym that I was training at when I was younger. So I think it's a good option. I also think there's something about the angle of the decline bench which does seem to hit your entire chest. It's not accurate to say it's a lower chest movement. I find it hits the upper chest quite well too. But then I also found the weighted dips hit the upper chest really well. So I don't think some of these truths, which are assumed to be true, are always true. Like the decline bench is for your lower pecs, the dips are for your lower pecs. I don't always think that's true. In my experience, the decline bench was a really good exercise. I would say the only potential downside is if you do fail, the bar's only going to slip up your body up to your neck. But, you know, just be safe. So I like it. I think it's a really good option. If you were to do that on your heavy day or even your medium day, I think that would be a good way to go, for sure. For sure. Okay, so we've got a bit more time left, so let's go through some more questions. FitEA.ig. He says, how to implement heavy singles for strength. Okay, so firstly, I had a look at his page, and I don't think the young man has English as his first language, so well done. I can't communicate in Spanish, so good job. Okay, well, I think, first of all, there's nothing on your page which suggests you are a powerlifter. All of your pictures and posts seem to look at general bodybuilding. You don't seem to exhibit any actual interest in strength training. So I would caution you on implementing heavy singles. You know, firstly, I don't think it's a good idea unless you are specifically a powerlifter. If you are a powerlifter, there's a good argument to be made for keeping the skill of singles year round. And to do that, I would just recommend rotating lifts. And also, you don't have to max out. So rotating lifts, not maxing out, that would be the strategy I would employ in the off season year round for a powerlifter who actually competes. For yourself, I would caution you against heavy singles. I don't think there's a point. I think you can build strength in any rep range. And the most I would do with you is perhaps sets of 5. I just don't think it's necessary. It takes a lot away from your training, a lot of time to warm up and prep for it, a lot of mental energy. And then it's also a lot of risk attached. It's relatively more risky for what you're getting from it. Like, you just don't seem like you need it right now. So I think it sounds like a good idea. Like, I want to test my strength. In practice, it's horrible for hypertrophy. And with respect, from your page, you look like you're still in the building up phase. So I just would pour your recovery and energy into just building yourself up bigger. That's all for now. When you want to do a powerlifting competition, when you've done your first one, and then you have a full off season ahead of you, that's when I think it would be wise to implement in the ways that I talked about earlier. So Troy getting stronger. I like Troy. Troy is a guy I follow on Instagram, and he's got just absolutely no quit whatsoever. I love this guy. Has some great training. So yeah, he says, is it worthwhile having one of your workouts per week made up exclusively of supersets, and would you superset the same or different body parts? I would say absolutely no. Absolutely not. Sorry. I just think that's a very, very random and haphazard way to program. No, I don't like days of things, because I think like people do, for example, upper lowers with an arm day. I think that's absolutely disastrous. Or PPL with an arm day. I think that's bordering on. I don't want to be harsh about it, but yeah, I'll just say politely. I don't think it's a good idea. So yeah, and that is when people do upper lowers with arm days or PPLs with arm days. I unequivocally do not think that's a good idea. And the same answer for your question: is it worthwhile having a workout week made up of supersets? No, not at all. Because then I would say, why don't we include? If it's useful to include, why don't we include that across the week? what's wrong with your programming that we can't include that appropriately? Because let's say we superset chest and back. Well, that's going to have a knock-on effect to your chest and back training for the rest of the week. It's potentially going to cause more shoulder stress. It's potentially going to cause more elbow stress. Or let's say it's arm supersets. Why don't we just program in more arm work across the week? I don't understand this random haphazard tagging in of extra stuff. When I say I don't understand it, I mean I don't think it's appropriate. No, I would say if you feel like supersets are worth doing, program them in appropriately. I unequivocally do not like the idea of just tagging in a random day to do stuff. I think it needs to be programmed in with respect to your weekly volume and also the local stress on different areas like the shoulder joint, the elbow joint, the knee joint, the backs, all that kind of stuff. All of that needs to be taken into account. This is one of the things where I think when people ask me about my opinions on exercises, I'm fairly equivocal because I don't think exercises really matter that much, or splits. It doesn't matter. It's all about volume allocation and how much stress you're putting on an area. That's what it's about. And even intensity allocation as well. Basically, stress. It's about stress. How much stress are you putting on an area, and is that appropriate stress? I look at everything from a top-down point of view. And so when somebody says to me, like I actually got this question on DM recently, can I add in an arm day on my PPL? My question is why? Just program the PPL better. I don't get it. And again, I'm not saying I don't understand it. I think it's dumb, Frank. I didn't want to say it, but I don't think it's a good idea. By the way, Troy, I'm not calling you dumb. I'm just saying the general idea that people have of adding in like specific extra days, I don't like it. It's just, let's just program the main portion of your split better. Let's do that better rather than just tagging in a random arm day. I don't like that at all. And that goes with a PPL. It goes with a upper lower, and it goes with, the idea of doing supersets. We have to respect the overall stress across the week. That's how people get injured. If you don't do that, that's how people get injured. So, okay. I think I've covered that enough. So next question. This is a really good question by my boy, B Monty. B Monty is the absolute man. He's been here since day one. And we recently did a stiff leg deadlift critique of his over on Steve Shaw's channel, which was fun. So he asked a really good question. Mitigating mental discouragement when having to implement weight resets. It's a good question. I.e., going a touch deeper on squats or cutting your plates on leg presses in half and looking like a pro that just made a leg day resolution. That's great. That's hilarious. Yeah, good question. Good question. I had to do this. I'll give you an example. So when I first started training back in 2000, my idea was I'm just going to squat, deadlift. You know my backstory. I started with the basics. Now, one day I was squatting, and I was only squatting 80 kilos, like a plate and a half, maybe 2 plates. And there was this guy. Actually, no, I'd gotten up to squatting 2 plates or something like that. And there was this guy, this older guy called Ron. And he was, at the time, he must have been 60. And he came up to me and goes, "Look, young man, you don't want to be squatting like that." And I said, "Why?" And this was back in the day where, random people would actually come up to you and ask you or give you advice. Nowadays, nobody gives me advice now. People look at me and go, "Let's just leave that guy alone." So yeah, I kind of missed that in a way. But this was back in the day when people would give me advice. I was not built like I am now. And he came up to me and says, "Young man, if you squat down that low, what's going to happen is and he did this thing. He's like, as you squat down, you're going to wibble." And he wibbled. He wibbled like this. And he says, "You do that. You do one thing like that, right? You wibble like that. And that's it. You're going to ruin your hips for life." I was like, "Oh, shit. Man, I'm 18 years old. I don't want to ruin my hips for life. This guy, Ron, he must be talking some sense." So I was like, okay, Ron. All right, what do I do? And he said, "Yeah, you only want to squat halfway down. So if you squat halfway down, you can do it nice and controlled. You squat all the way, then you wibble." I think back to that conversation. I'm like, this guy must have been senile or something. I had no idea what he was talking about. But back then, I took it really seriously because I was like, okay, I was really fresh to the gym. So over the course of that first year, I ended up going up to, I think, 4 plates aside on the partial squat, as you do as an 18-year-old with 8 months of training, realizing, of course, that going up that heavy, because Ron told me, I shouldn't squat all the way down, was absolutely hell on my back. Every time I got under the squat bar, I felt like my back was going to crack in half. So after one session, I was speaking to my brother, because we used to train back then together. It's like, this isn't working. It's like, yeah, this feels terrible. So we were both doing, like, you know, sets of 6 to 8 with a ridiculous amount of weight. So I was like, you know what? I think Ron screwed us over here. And he's like, yeah, I think he has. So I was like, okay, next session, we're going to squat all the way down. So I was like, okay. So after squatting 2 plates to depth, and then working up to 4 plates, partial squats, how much do you think I started squatting with the next session after that? What do you think? Embarrassingly, I had to go down to a plate and a half. A plate and a half. So here I am, having been a to depth 2-plate squatter, then having gone up to be a 4-plate squatter. Bear in mind, at the time, I was also deadlifting 4.5 plates legitimately. Now I'm having to squat with a plate and a half. I'm looking over at Ron like, Ron, if you weren't that old, I would clock you right now. So anyway, I get it. Like, I get there's a big ego thing, but I would just say with that, even back then, I just inherently knew. I mean, after almost breaking my back, I inherently knew this just wasn't it. It wasn't working. I think if yours isn't as bad, because I've seen your squats, they're not anywhere near as bad as mine were. Mine were real half squats. But I think you just got to do what you feel is best for you, and understand that it's best for you. It's kind of like, who was talking about this recently? Damien from Breaking Beta was talking about this with GVS recently, Jeffrey, about living frugally and not being flashy. It's kind of the same thing. When I was younger, I didn't have any money, right? But now I don't drive a flash car at all. I don't drive a flash car. I don't do flash things. And I know a lot of people who do flash things and live well beyond their means. And part of that is trying to show people you almost have more than you have, in a sense. And I think you can use that same mentality when it comes to lifting weights, because I know you're very sensible. You're like me, you know, you have your fun, but you're all about your family. I think that's great. I see your stories. So I think it's the same mindset, which means you're going to be okay with just pulling the weights down, because it's not flashy, but it's what does the job. So that's what I would say is probably, I would encourage you to have that mentality. Yeah. So that's what I would say. You know, it's the right thing to do. Okay. All right. You know what? We're going to go through and do a couple more, maybe one more. I will end with something which is a bit more personal. So Ben Mitchell asked me this in this Q&A. I think he's asked me something like this before too. But I didn't get to answer it last time. So I'm going to answer Ben's question. He says, not sure if you've addressed this before in a previous one, but why did you start lifting, and how have your motivations changed over time? Okay. So I think that's a great question. My favorite topic, talking about me. So yeah, I think there's 2 things. Firstly, I think motivations do change over time, like why you train. I'll tell you what else changes though. The first part of your question was, why did you start lifting? If you had asked me that, well, let me start that again. As you mature, the understanding for why you began lifting changes as well. Now that's something, I think, Ben, I think you're still quite young, so you'll see this as you grow older. And I like your posts. You come across as a very introspective person. I think you will realize as you get older why you did things that you did when you're younger. Does that make sense? You start to have more of a realization. Like I'll give you an example. When I was 18, if you had asked me why I started training, I would have told you it was because I discovered girls. And then I also discovered that they weren't really looking at me. So my motivation was purely to get a girlfriend, to feel more attractive. I was fat and under-muscled when I was a kid, right? And so that was my motivation. And literally that 2-year period where I lost a lot of weight and I gained all the muscle, it completely transformed how people saw me and who I was to other people. I was still the same guy. But yeah, I mean, the reaction I got from women was, and girls back then, was very different. So in the first instance, when I was 18, if you had asked me why I trained, it was because of that. Now, if you had asked me when I was 30, so 10, 12 years later, why did I begin training? I would have said for health reasons, because I have some health issue history on my father's side. So it'd be like, I started training to be healthy, because the males on my father's side don't do so well health-wise. So that's what I would have said. And now, at age 40, or age 41 now, if you had asked me why I started training, I would have said a different answer. And that is, I feel like I was probably carrying some trauma from my father's early passing when I was a kid. And I think that trauma is what drove me to want to feel strong. I wanted to feel strong because I was in a position where I felt very weak. So you see how the same question, as you mature and you realize more about yourself, it changes. Because all the answers are relevant. When I was 18, that answer was still correct. And it's still correct now. I probably did start training to attract girls. And I probably did start training to make sure I stayed in good health. But I can tell you now, I definitely started training and I kept at it because I wanted to feel strong. And in terms of how my motivations have changed over time, I feel like I've had a very blessed life of training, honestly. I can say that now. I really do. I feel, looking back now, I just feel like I've had just such a blessed time. And most of it was because I was fearless. I started powerlifting. I did my very first competition. It was a strongman competition, 8 months into training, because I had no fear, like no fear at all. And I was up against some pretty strong guys. There's one guy who was a sumo wrestler, another guy who was a national world arm wrestling champion. There were some Olympic lifters there who were on the national scene, big bodybuilders. Like I just went in. I had no expectation of myself, and I went in. A year later, I competed in my first powerlifting competition, or was it the same year? Something like that. Yeah, the same year I competed in my first powerlifting competition in 2000 as well. And I've competed in, 4 different sports over the last 20 years. I don't mention the fourth one because it's a bit oddball, but I competed in strongman, powerlifting, bodybuilding, and also this weird offshoot of strongman, which was grip training. So you train your grip, basically. Strange, I know. I'll explain it another time. So, and also I've now done races. So I've raced. I did a 10K. So I feel very blessed that my motivations have always come from this anchor of competition, of sports, of wanting to push myself. And that's something which is innate. It's sort of deep inside. I always had a drive to push myself. I don't explain it. I mean, perhaps if you ask me again when I'm 50, perhaps I'll talk about where that drive comes from. I don't know, because it's not always positive, but it's overwhelmingly positive. There are some negatives with it as well. But yeah, I think my motivations nowadays are still to look good. I think I do take pride in how I look, because a lot of my peers at my age, they look a lot more weathered, I guess. So there is a constant warning of, okay, don't let yourself go. You don't look like that. So I think, yeah, I like to keep myself in good physical shape, because it shows in your face, it shows in your physique. So I think that's part of it. It's also it's more of a maintenance at this stage in terms of how I look, but I think health comes into it too. I made the decision in about 2020 to drop a lot of weight for health reasons, just not because there's anything wrong, but because guys who push size in their 40s, they tend to drop dead in their 50s. It's just not a healthy game. So now I'm trying to sort of have a balance of still looking good, still looking athletic, but ensuring that I'm not causing issues up to my 50s and 60s, which are going to bite me later on. So yeah, I think I'm more interested nowadays in just feeling good. When I was younger, I didn't really care so much about feeling good. It was more about performance. Just do what you need to do. But yeah, hopefully the first part of that answer told you a little bit more about how possibly your motivations will change over time and how you'll discover more about yourself, because you definitely will. You seem like a very introspective person, so you definitely will. So yeah. Right, we'll call that there for today. Hopefully you all enjoyed that Q&A, and I'll do a few more of these over the course of this week and I'll try and get through all the questions as best I can. All right, guys. Thank you.